The January 6th Select Committee, just to kind of reset for our YouTube viewers who will watch this in a new segment, released their final report on the January 6th attack, and then also all of the different elements of Trump's attempts to overturn the election and all of this. And another fascinating bit of this report that is being highlighted now that it's been released is a few more things in relation to Cassidy Hutchinson. So you probably remember Cassidy Hutchinson was this bombshell testimony that was given in front of the January 6th committee on national television, where she revealed a lot of different interesting bits of information because she was a close aide of Trump's chief of staff, Mark Meadows, which the chief of staff is right there in the room with so many of these moments. So then by proxy, she was in many of those settings as well. And the part I want to focus in on now that was revealed through this report was how terrified Cassidy Hutchinson was of the Trump team and Trump world if she told the truth, and what they would do in response to that. And then also we'll get to in this segment talking about how pushed she was by the lawyer that she got at the beginning, who was a Trump aligned lawyer, to lie in front of the committee and say that she didn't recall things that she did. So first, just to highlight how terrified she was of Trump world, the context for this segment of the report I'm about to read you is that she was going to have to go in front of the committee. So she needed legal counsel. She needed a lawyer, and that costs money. And so she was having a hard time figuring out, how do I get a lawyer? How do I get the money to pay for this lawyer? But then the tough part about it is her only options were lawyers who were Trump aligned, because those were the ones who the Trump world would support in her, payment of those lawyers, if that makes sense. So it's like, we'll help you get a lawyer if you get a lawyer that's friendly to the Trump camp, but she didn't yet have enough resources to get a lawyer who wasn't friendly with the Trump world. And so this was a terrifying situation for her, as media highlights from the report. I remember having a conversation with my mom a few days later, and my mom and I are close. This is Cassidy Hutchinson testifying. We're not extremely close, and I hadn't really talked to her about a lot of this throughout this period. Like, she knew I was looking for attorneys, and she asked me, like, aren't you really happy? Like, this is great. I'm so happy that, just so you know, all the likes I'm reading directly off the page, like, they connected you with someone. And I remember saying to her, like, kind of snarly laughing, saying, no, I'm effed. And she was like, what? What do you mean? And I was like, no, I'm completely indebted to these people. And I was like, and they will ruin my life, Mom, if I do anything that they don't want me to. And she was like, well, what would you possibly do? She was like, there's nothing that they can do to you. And at that point, I just remember being like, I can't delve into these conversations. But that was always a thought in the back of my mind. And I was scared. Even in the days, like, as I had been speaking with Eric and Susie Willis and David Salvavian, I can never say his last name, neither could I, that's what she said, and I was communicating with my aunt and uncle, who I had not spoken with in years because they are QAnon fans, but they were looking to refinancing their house to free up money so I could not have to go back to Trump world. Like, they understood why I didn't want to. So to give you, because that's kind of jumbled, she's saying her aunt and uncle, who are so far right, they're QAnon people, even they were thinking about refinancing their house so that they could pay for Cassidy Hutchinson to have a lawyer that wasn't a Trump lawyer, because they realized how tough of a situation it was, where Trump world was going to support Cassidy Hutchinson in getting this lawyer, but make sure that a lawyer was pro-Trump and would give her bad advice. Last part of this little part of the report, I don't have a relationship with my biological father, but I went to his house one night. I drove up to New Jersey and I went to his house one night and begged him. It's probably one thing I regret in all of this. I wish I didn't stoop to that level, because it was a no, but I begged him to help me. I said I would pay him back, like, name your interest rate, like, I just need help. And I remember saying to him, you have no idea what they're going to do to me. You have no idea what they're going to do to me. So to restate one more time, she, at that point in time, her only option was the Trump world would help her get a lawyer who would be friendly to them. And she thought if that was the case, she would then be indebted to the Trump world in such a way, and they would be threatening her and they would do horrible things to her publicly and all this, and get the mob to be sicked on her if she didn't do exactly what they wanted, which would be to not tell the truth. And pretend she didn't recall things that she did. And that's when we get into this element. The lawyer she ended up starting with, which was a Trump-aligned lawyer, was Stefan Passantino. And this lawyer was giving Cassidy Hutchinson advice that was so bad, it borders on, she could have been lying under oath by saying, I don't recall things that I do, as is highlighted here. This is more of Cassidy Hutchinson's testimony. I told Stefan that day about the incident that happened in the Beast, which I should refer to it as the presidential limo because that was one. And I remember saying to Stefan, Tony Ornato and I were very close at the White House. Tony told me this incident happened. And I didn't go into extremely graphic detail telling Stefan about it. I tried to kind of make it more casual than my conversation with Tony really was. But I think I said something to Stefan like, quote, yeah, I had this conversation with Tony Ornato when we got back from the rally that day, and he told me that the president tried to wrap his hands around Bobby's neck and strangle him because he wouldn't take him to the Capitol. And Stefan, this is the lawyer going back to Cassidy Hutchinson, saying, quote, no. I remember he sat back in his chair and he's like, quote, no. We don't want to go there. We don't want to talk about that. So Stefan Passantino, who is aligned with Trump, who was the Trump White House ethics lawyer, if you can imagine, is telling Cassidy Hutchinson, don't tell that story even though that you do remember it. Say you don't recall any of that. I said again, trying to kind of appease what he was saying, no, I own that. I said, I agree, Stefan, but what if they do? Quote, they have no way of knowing that. Nobody would ever, he said. Did you ever tell anybody about that? I said, no, I've never told anybody about that. And he said, well, I don't think that Tony would have told anybody about that. And he's like, that's an example of one of those stories that is just going to give the committee a headline. It's not important to anything that actually happened on that day. It's a headline. It's a cool story for them. And it goes on and on and on. And it's just the best example of how Stefan Passantino is trying to get Cassidy Hutchinson to not divulge all the information that she was aware of. And imagine if you were Cassidy Hutchinson. You have all this information. Now your lawyer is hearing you tell of this encounter you had and saying, don't tell any of that. There's no need for the committee to be aware of that. Even if they ask, just say you don't recall. And then your fear is, if I don't do what this lawyer is telling me, Trump world is going to come after me and be super angry at the fact that I revealed this information. Truly dangerous. And then more from the report that Mediaite highlights here. Look at how just manipulative this is from the perspective of the lawyer. He goes, this is more of Cassidy Hutchinson's testimony. He goes, quote, no. He said, look, we want to get you in, get you out. We're going to downplay your role. You were a secretary. You had an administrative role. Everyone's on the same page about this. That's interesting. Everyone's on the same page about this. It's extremely unfair that they're being the committee, that the committee is putting you in this position in the first place. You really have nothing to do with any of this. It's Mark's fault that you were even involved in this. So just kind of more of that. Don't talk about it. Pretend like you didn't have that big of a role. And at a later point, and once we close the door, so this is Cassidy Hutchinson in a later testimony talking about what happened in a previous testimony when she had Stefan Passantino as a lawyer and then got rid of Stefan Passantino, got a new lawyer, and now is telling the committee more of what happened during one of her testimonies. So she leaves the room after testifying for a bit, and this is what happened. And once we closed the door, the glass door, I looked at Stefan and I said, quote, Stefan, I'm effed. And he was like, don't freak out, you're fine. I said, no, Stefan, I'm effed. I just lied. And he said, you didn't lie. And it goes on to describe more of that. So even in the moment when she still had Stefan Passantino as her lawyer before she got rid of him, she was realizing that the advice he was giving was causing her to have to lie under oath, or at least not remember things that she did remember under oath. And a CNN correspondent outlines how that could be a crime.
Ellie, your reaction to this? Did her lawyer cross the line?
Well, Anna, I don't recall is a very common refrain, unfortunately, in legal proceedings, whether it's trials or this kind of testimony. And it's important to understand, though, that is not an automatic do whatever you want for free card. It can be difficult to disprove, but if you're a lawyer and your client does know or does recall something and you tell them, just say you don't recall, that crosses a line. All these other pressure tactics, they happen. It's not okay, but the line is crossed if he tells her to testify falsely, and that would be false if that's the way it proves out.
Is there any impact on Cassidy Hutchinson's credibility?
Absolutely. So the committee is going to argue that if she gave incomplete or even incorrect testimony in the initial phases, which it appears she might have, they're going to say that's because she was being pressured or she felt pressured by these lawyers. Trump's lawyers are going to say, look, she wasn't fully truthful the first time. Why can you trust her later testimony? That's the battle that we're going to see here.
Sarah, the committee's...
So was it too far across the line for Stephen Passantino to give the advice of, no, don't talk about that if they ask, just pretend you don't remember it? Because that would be, in effect, lying to the committee under oath, which is absolutely wild. All of this is incredible. And as I previously mentioned in the last segment, we will be continuing to go through the report and grab interesting bits of information to look at with you over the next few days. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to be a part of what makes this show possible, plus get access to the full video version of the show hours before any of the clips are uploaded to YouTube, plus get a full extra show every single Saturday, you can do so by going to patreon.com/Luke Beasley. That's patreon.com/Luke Beasley, and there's a link in the description.